justice was all about. The King family and the Abernathy family were interesting. From a class standpoint, they probably were more middle class than the rest of us in the congregation. But there was something reachable about them. There was something that wasn't contrived about them. And so we all felt like they were all a part of our family. And again, we had no idea at the time that we were among giants and later icons. There's something that I learned in that moment, and I want that to be the basis for the rest of the things I want to talk to you about. I learned in that moment, particularly watching Martin Luther King, that it is quite possible to create peace out of pain. I learned that it was quite possible to create peace out of pain. So I want to talk to you about that for a minute. You know, I realized Martin Luther King wasn't the only one that had a dream. I realized that I've been having them too. And so I want to talk to you about 4 or 5 things, and I will entitle what I'm going to talk about, I Have a Dream Too. So here's my first one. You know, when John introduced me, he told you a little bit about me, but I want to tell you a little bit more about me. In 2016, I live in Denver. I was sitting in the executive suite of the job of my dreams, Children's Hospital, Colorado. My whole dream had been, throughout my career, to land in the executive suite of a major top-tier hospital doing what I do best. That's all I dreamed about. And there I was in it. I'd arrived. The dream had come true. And then in 2016, our presidential election happened. And almost overnight, I saw our country, my friends, my community, and even things inside of my hospital polarize. Polarized to the degree that I literally couldn't sleep at night. I felt like it was Groundhog's Day. I felt like I was living through what I'd already lived through in my lifetime. And so I made the biggest decision I've ever made, frankly, in my entire life. And that decision was to give up on my dream for a different dream. This dream of landing in the C-suite of a hospital, to put that away and say goodbye to it, to go into the new thing I was dreaming about. And the new thing I was dreaming about was something that I wanted to do to change the nation. I started an organization called the Equity Project. Little old me wanted to have a consulting firm with the sole purpose of traveling our country, talking to communities and companies and systems about what it will take to advance equity in ways that we've never talked about before. That was my dream. And my action was, I did it. So I left Children's Hospital to take this new journey, and it is one of the many reasons I'm standing in front of you today. That's just one of my dreams. There's some other ones I want to talk to you about too. I want to journey with you a little bit, just a little bit, into things that happened when I was young, like you. My father, John Mosby, named after a slave master, Colonel John Mosby, Confederate soldier. Interesting history there. My father was the smartest man I've ever met to this day. He only graduated from 10th grade because he went into the military. I have a special fondness for my dad, and he had a very special fondness for me. So fond, however, that he wouldn't let me do normal things like ride a school bus to school. He would say, I want to be the one to take you to school because any time I get to spend with you, I want to do that. So he never let me ride the school bus. I looked forward to him picking me up from school. On this particular day, he picked me up from school, and on our way home, he said, let's stop and get a burger and some fries and a milkshake, and then you can catch me up on what you did at school today. And I thought that was grand. So we got in the car, and we went to the restaurant, and we walked in. We got to the hostess station, and the hostess said, my dad said, we just need a seat for two. The hostess reached down, sort of like a podium like that. She reached down and she pulled out a sign and she put it up front. It said, no coloreds. So I could read too, by the way. So I read the sign. My dad looked at me and I looked at him. My dad said, you know what? My hamburgers are better at home anyway. And we left. When we got home, I said, Dad, I kind of don't get it. I don't understand that. And my dad said, one day you will. One day you will. I sat with that almost all of my life, wondering why. Then it became a part of my dream. What could I do in my life to make sure that that never happened to anyone else? What could I do in my life so that there would be no card that said no to any of your identities, no to your race and ethnicity, no to where you grew up, no to your zip code, no to your sexual orientation, no to your political affiliation? I wanted to eradicate any chance that you'd have to go through that. I have a dream too about inclusion. Another story I will tell you is the neighborhood that we lived in. We grew up in an all-black neighborhood because we were in the segregated South. There was no choice in that. And one thing that I learned, because I had a school teacher for a mother, is that some kids had things that other kids didn't have. And though none of us had a whole lot, I did realize at my house, my mother made it a point to make sure that we had lots of books in our house. She was an educator. When you think about things like that, where one house has one thing and the other house doesn't, what an opportunity for us to start to think about equity. Something really interesting happened since we had so many books in our basement. I think I counted over 650 books on our bookshelf. I decided at the age of 8 to create a library in the basement of our house. I didn't tell my parents. I just took a marker and wrote Due Back Monday on every book on the shelf. Over the years, kids were coming through the back door of our basement checking out books from my library. And I felt great about it because remember, my dream was about equity. What can I do to make sure everybody has what they need to thrive? So the library ran for several years out of the basement of my house, late fees and all. I prayed every day that everybody was late. It was 10 cents a day. It was awesome. When I turned 40 years old, which was a long time ago, when I turned 40 years old, I got a call from my 80-something-year-old mom. And she said, Nita, I was cleaning out the attic, and I saw all of these old books. She said, they all say Due Back Monday. Do you know anything about that? I said, yeah, 32 years ago, I was running a library out of the basement. And that's because equity was what it was all about. I just wrote a book recently. It's called White People Really Love Salad. If you don't say anything. Just don't tell me. It's too late. And the title of the book is really about a story in the book. And it's another example of something I have a dream about. My family integrated a neighborhood. We moved out of the city and moved to the suburbs. We were the first black family in that neighborhood, and the neighborhood was not happy to see us. We had lots of things that happened to us when we moved into that neighborhood. People were mean. They spewed hate. They even sprayed the N-word on our garage door. It wasn't pretty. The welcome wagon was not happening. But there was a young lady in our neighborhood that I happened to be in school with. She was a white girl, and she said, "I want you to come over to our house for dinner." And I said, "Okay, cool." She didn't invite my parents. She just invited me, and off I went. When we sat down for dinner, in the middle of the dinner table was a big salad. And everybody served themselves, and I got a little bit because I was making room for the rest of the dinner. And the white family had salad piled up to here, which made me say, white people really love salad. How are they going to eat all of that and then have room for dinner? Not knowing that that was dinner. Well, culturally, salad was not a part of the main dish in my growing up. And so I was in a position of experiencing something I'd never experienced before. I'd never had salad as the main course in a dinner. So when I got home, my parents said, "Well, how was dinner?" And I said, "It was terrible." And my mother said, "What do you mean it was terrible?" I said, "They didn't have any food. They're poor." My dad said, "Well, how could they be poor? We live here with them. We're not poor. How are they poor?" I said, "I'm telling you, they didn't have any food." So my dad said, "Well, we've got to do something about it." And my mom said, "What do you mean we've got to do something about it?" He says, "Well, we got to help them. We got to help them." My mom said, "We're not helping them. They just sprayed the N-word on our garage door. Why would we be helping?" And my dad said, "That's not the way it works. When hate is present, love should rise. So we're going to help them, the poor white people that have salad." So the next day, my mother goes into full-on cooking all this food. It's like Thanksgiving going on at our house right now for this family. She cooked everything. There was so much food, we had to load it in the car just to drive it around the corner. So we get to the family's house, we knock on the door, and my dad was classic at making up stuff. He said, "We are the reverse welcome wagon. It's where the new neighbors do something nice for the old neighbors. And then all of the food we give to this family. We thought they were poor. They thought we were nice." It's my story about equity, though. Oh, how I've learned so much from my dad about what that's all about. The other story I will share with you really is probably the most important story, and I tell it all the time about how we look at this thing we call dreaming. I did have a dream about being a ballerina. My parents said, "Great, we'll put you in the ballet school." So of course we went to the ballet school, and we got there and they said, "We don't accept Negroes." I was in kindergarten. We got back in the car and my mother just simply drove me to the next ballet school, and they said, "We don't accept Negroes." Then we went to ballet school number 3, 4, 5, and 6. Each one of them said, "We don't accept Negroes." So when I got back in the car after the 6th time, I said to my mom, "Why don't they want me?" And my mom said, "They don't know how excellent you are yet." Now you can imagine that doesn't make sense to a kindergartner either. About 2 weeks after that happened, something really interesting happened in my all-black inner-city kindergarten. A lady walked in, a beautiful, white woman. I call her beautiful because we'd never seen anyone that looked like this before. She was dressed in leotards and tights and a tutu. She was beautiful. She stood in front of us. First of all, I'm not sure that we'd ever even seen a white person at our school before. She stood in front of us and she said, "Good morning, class," and we all said, "Good morning." She said, "My name is Miss Ann." And we said, "Good morning, Miss Ann." And she said, "I am going to be your ballet teacher." And we all just sat back in our chairs like, whoa. It was right there in that moment that I believe I learned about the word equity. And here's what I want you to know about the word equity. It comes sometimes in unsuspecting packages. It doesn't always look like what you think it's going to look like. I learned that in my Miss Ann moment. The other thing I learned about equity in that moment is that equity truly takes courage and bravery. It's not always easy, bumpy. Sometimes it hurts. Sometimes it hurts your feelings. Bravery and courage it takes. And lastly, the thing that I learned about equity right then is that it takes love and caring. And the reality is, if you don't care and you don't love, you won't do it. That's my Miss Ann story. And so what I want to leave you with in that story, if I can hold it together long enough to leave it, I want each of you to know at CMU in Grand Junction that no matter what you look like, each of you is the Miss Ann in somebody's life. And whether you know it or not, whether somebody's told you or not, you, by virtue of what you're setting out to do here, setting out to create racial justice, setting out to end racism, setting out to eradicate anything that keeps people from being their best. You're doing that. Changes people's lives, saves people's lives, fortifies people's lives. That is awesome work, and you're doing that. The other thing I want you to know in the Miss Ann story is that it is also no accident that you're sitting here right now. And that there was somewhere in your story a Miss Ann in your life too that helped you to create Black Lives Matter in Grand Junction, that helped you to write that beautiful speech, that helped those musicians that were behind us be that talented in high school, to help our award winner keep on going. That's Miss Ann that fuels what you do. So I invite you to just do one thing, and that is have a dream. So what is your dream? And then when you figure out what it is, do something with it. Thank you.